Um, First, a quick bit about Yolt. So we are a smart money platform that was built to empower users to become smarter with their money every day. So we're at the forefront of PSD2 and open banking. And essentially, we're designed to put an end to multiple app juggling. So essentially, you can bring your accounts and your credit cards and your pension investments and see them all in one clear app. Over the last 18 months, we've grown to about 500,000 registered users in the UK, and we've also just launched in Italy and France as well. So these are three of the main areas that, when we think about that, we thought we could see improvements upon by bringing our UA in-house. So the first one is quality. So when you spend with an agency, if you spend a ton of money, you'll probably have a dedicated account team. If you spend less, you will probably be within an account team who actually manage multiple clients at once, which is where we were. And actually, our account team were all very knowledgeable and all definitely knew their stuff. But we hypothesized that by having an in-house team whose focus, who were responsible and accountable solely for the success of UA, we could better the performance that we're seeing. And also, when you are actively managing accounts and pushing and pulling the levers, you generally tend to get to understand the key drivers of performance more than if you were just receiving a report with some commentary and some analysis and insights on there. So we thought with that increased transparency, that increased control over campaigns, that we would be able to increase the quality of work, essentially. Second one, big one, obviously, is cost. So essentially, what you want to do here is you want to tot up all your the fees, commissions, retainers, and whatnot that you pay for your agency, and set it against the salary that you'd pay for a full-time employee to do that same work. But a really key point here is make sure if you're thinking about this, you can audit the tools and the insights that you use that agency. So agencies a lot of times have access to consumer insight tools, to competitor and intelligence tools and reporting tools, some of which they might absorb that cost, some of which they might pass back, but you might be profiting from that. So you really want to make sure that you're aware of that, and if you are bringing on UA in-house, you make sure that there's data there that you're reliant on that you can actually still use. So you need to factor that into your budgets and things as well. But nonetheless, we estimate we've made about 10 to 15% cost efficiency by bringing our activity in-house. The third one is based around speed, and I'm actually going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides' time. So I'm going to skip on to the first lesson. So this one I wanted to put really front and center. So by far and away, the most important key to success in UA is going to be the people that you hire. And I wanted to put the point about being more important than tech, because I think a lot of the times when we speak about in-housing, the conversation really quickly goes to tech. You start talking about what DSP are you using and what automation tool and what's your tech stack. And frankly, whilst we do test new channels and we're constantly testing new channels and platforms, the bulk of our acquisition activity is really centered around Google, Facebook, Apple Search, and actually their self-serve platforms are pretty decent. We also use a bunch of Excel and a ton of sum ifs and VLOOKUPs for our analysis, which might be horrifying to some, but works for us. And we find basically with experienced practitioners who follow defined processes, we can get by just fine using self-serve and a relatively simple tech stack. So I think the question you want to ask is actually what is the bare minimum we can get away with in terms of tech stack? Don't increase the complexity. We also know that one of the biggest keys to success is having a clear line of sight between strategy and tactics. And that's why we were very careful to recruit for a blend of seniority. So we're very good at looking at the big picture, but we're also really good at getting into the detail and executing all the small details that you need for UA, and that's a very deliberate recruitment process. Specifically in the type of people that we hire, we found really good success hiring from full-service media agencies. So within our team, we have people who've worked on the likes of Google and P&G, Department of Work, 3, Nintendo, and we find that breadth of experience that you get from working in a full-service media agency is really, really valuable. So we found a lot of success from those kind of areas. So the other just small point I want to make on the hiring is make sure you account for the time it takes. So it took us about 5 to 6 months to find the real key person who had the right, people who had the right blend of skills and experience, and obviously company fit. So if you have a date in mind for your switch over, if you want to go in-house, make sure you've factored in recruiting and probably factor in a little bit more time than you thought. You also want to make sure that you, as a part of your UA strategy, you want to have a plan in place to how to attract and retain that talent. And it's really useful to think about what agencies actually are really particularly good at in this space. So one is a culture of innovation, right? So agencies, you get to work across a load of different verticals and industries, and you get people from TV and radio and out of home and display and content, and they all bring to bear on your account. So you have a really diverse view of opinions and experiences, and that really helps in terms of innovation. When you get client side, it tends to be you're quite inward facing, quite narrow focused, and you want to make sure that you have mechanisms in place to try and be as outward focused as possible. So one of the things we do at Yotza, we have a series of talks called Unthink Tanks every month. So last month we talked about, where we had outside speakers come in, we talked about AI and mental health, and yesterday actually we had one where we talked about science fiction, and that's just a way we can kind of get our heads out of just the day-to-day and narrow and make sure we're kind of trying to optimize for innovation. The second is skills and training. So agencies are really, really good at skills and training. They put a lot of time and money into this, which is why they're also good to hire from. Sorry, agencies. So you want to make sure you have some kind of plan in place for this, right? So do you have a budget for education? Do you encourage people to come along to events like this? Do you have knowledge sharing, things like that? Very important. Ownership is the last point. So one of the big reasons that people will want to move from agencies to client side is to have more ownership or to get closer to business decisions. So have a think about what kind of projects to do with, say, marketing strategy or product strategy, and see and try and give a new starter ownership of that as early as possible. And those are 3 points that you can take to kind of attract and retain talent, which is a really, really key part of your taking UA in-house. So the second lesson, you must bring creative in-house as well. So this is a typical agency briefing process. This was ours, so you kind of send a brief in, there's a load of feedback, you get first draft back, feedback again, you eventually get some finished creative, you then put it live, you have a report maybe a week later, you kind of discuss the insights, and then that kind of feeds back in. Charitably speaking, that can go 7 days, probably not like 2 weeks, even a month, that process. It's a little bit slow. Since we've brought, so we actually have a performance creative, 100% dedicated in-house. And so since bringing that in-house, this is what the process looks like, which is actually the same process. But what we've actually managed to do is massively speed up the time it takes for some key parts of that. So particularly from getting some finished creative, putting it live, optimize it, getting insights, and we've massively speeded that process up. Even the briefing, the feedback process gets better as well, because you have much more opportunity to have lots more on-the-fly, face-to-face conversations that you don't really have when you're briefing out a third party. And it was interesting in the talk before, actually, in the panel that Fiona moderated, because there was talk about letting creative breathe and failing fast might not be the best thing. Now, obviously, if we have creative that works, we're not afraid to keep it running, and in many aspects, we go against best practices and we keep it running for way longer than you're supposed to. But actually, we know about 70 to 80% of creative actually fails, in that it doesn't beat your current best performers. So actually, what you do need to build is a mechanism by which to fail faster, so you can get rid of those, the ones that don't perform as well, and get those insights feeding back into your activity. And that's what this is, essentially, is a mechanism. So bringing creative in-house is a bit of a must. So the third lesson, so we find when we were transitioning our accounts over that actually there were parts of them when we started digging them and we didn't really know what they were doing. So we didn't really understand really how our accounts were working. That's not really the fault of the agency, and typically with biddable accounts, when you start to layer on lots of audience targeting, creative testing, and different bidding objectives, you start to get really big, unwieldy beasts of accounts. So we took this as an opportunity to really simplify and strip back, and also focus in on what was really, really working. And actually, by doing that, we saw two particularly quick wins. I apologize, I can't share actual numbers, but these are actually pretty well optimized accounts beforehand. So we're talking about pretty numbers here. And with Facebook in particular, what we did was actually got rid of quite a lot of our hyper-targeted ad sets, and we actually stripped back to about 4 or 5 quite broad demo targeting, and we saw an immediate, really profound increase in the conversion rate because of that. And that's because we'd taken the time to kind of simplify everything and strip it back. The second one was focusing on search ads. So that's a really important channel for us in terms of volume and quality. And we essentially put a bespoke optimization plan together for that, where we had some very manual, very granular keyword optimization. We were changing bids very regularly. Actually, the type of thing that is very difficult for an agency to do when they're managing multiple accounts at once. And actually, so again, we've scaled from actually pretty healthy spends. We've managed to scale that pretty quickly. And we saw the efficiency massively increasing because we could give it that fine-grained control. So bringing in-house is a really good opportunity to simplify and focus. And you can see some real performance benefits off the back of that. So the fourth lesson, know your blockers. So a lot of times agencies actually do a lot of heavy lifting, which you won't be cognizant of if you haven't done it yourself. So one question to ask actually is, who owns your accounts? Right, so hopefully a lot of you will have built your accounts yourself, and you give third parties login to manage them, and it's much easier to kind of take them off. But actually, in a lot of instances, agencies build accounts for them, so they're much more embedded. So actually, when you're bringing things in-house, there's a lot more to extricate yourself from. Finance in particular is a really important one. So when you are paying an agency, they'll be taking care of all the billing. You need to think about you having billing relationships with all the suppliers yourself. So make sure you become friends with your finance department, know who you need to talk to, and make sure you've factored that into your timelines as well, because actually sometimes it can take a long while to actually unpick all of that. Procurement was another process for us, which was a bit of an eye-opener. So before, if we wanted to test a new channel, we would sign off a plan, sign off some budget, and we could be up and running within two weeks, a month. We actually have a bit more of a much more involved procurement process. So actually, when we want to test a new channel, there's a whole procurement process that we actually have to go through. And in some instances, that can take us up to 6 months, maybe more. So actually, we hadn't really factored that into our growth plans when we first brought it in-house. So actually, we had to, that put a massive hole in some of our plans, actually. So it's really important you get your head around some of your internal processes that might hold up your growth plans. Another really important one is representation. So because agencies have a lot of consolidated buying, they'll have direct relationships and reps from each of the platforms, even by industry sometimes, and that will be and they will be giving you heads up on new betas and product roadmaps, and there'll be a point of escalation. So you need to consider if you are then having that billing relationship, do you spend enough to actually get that representation? That's actually really important. So when I was at agency, we had early access to PLAs, which are now shopping campaigns. And by the time that kind of rolled out to the rest of the market, we were absolute experts on it. And we were actually able to benefit from increased click share against the competition for years after that, because we'd actually got access to early beta. And so you need to consider that you might not actually have that access to those kind of platforms if you go in-house. The final lesson, actually. So know when to call in the experts. So we actually run big awareness driving above the line campaigns, and when we were launching, we certainly leaned on agencies for this. So tapping into the kind of buying power expertise. So also internationalization. So when we roll out into new countries and we need that kind of work, we absolutely will partner with people who have more on-the-ground expertise of that kind of stuff. So we very much know our capabilities and our limitations, and we will definitely look to partner with people where it makes sense. So we won't do absolutely everything in-house. So that's it for all the lessons. So I'll leave you with a kind of handy cheat sheet for things to think about if you're thinking about bringing your user acquisition in-house. There's obviously a ton more to go over that I haven't talked about. So if anyone wants to come and chat, I'm here for the rest of the day. So and that's it. Thanks very much.